So you're telling me, Jeff, about mocking up these kind of headlines about how it was going to be a great show and you're going to be the host, and then
well,
what
I was
happened?
trying to break this notion that you had to be known, because that's what was getting in my way. It's the catch-22 of every young they want a person with a name. How do I get a name if I don't get a job? And I've never felt this about any other job I've been up for. I believed I was the right guy for Survivor, and I knew I could bring something to it because I just felt it in my bones. So I had nothing to lose. So I sent this, and I sent a copy to Mark Burnett and to Gen Maynard, who was the exec at CBS, who was overseeing the show. And, I didn't know if they got it or not. I knew it was risky because it could come across as pushy or, arrogant or something. But I really had nothing to lose. And then I got a call about 3 weeks later, and they said, "You're meeting at CBS on Friday for Survivor. It's you and one other guy." And so my energy started coming back up again. And I go to CBS, and I go to check in the front, and the guy before me is already signed in, and it's Phil Kogan. And I thought, man, I am connected to this. And I know Phil. So on some level, it's very cool that one of us is about to get a network show. On the other hand, I want it to be me. I'm not going to lie. Right. So we go into the green room together, and we just talked about, how cool it was. And then again, I think Phil went in first, and then I went in second. And we just talked. And there was people ask, how do you audition? You don't. You just talk about the show, and you talk about life, and you talk about what you're into. There was never okay, let me give you for example, Jeff. Because Mark didn't know the details of the show. He knew big picture. He knew what it was. But we were making it up as we went along out there. So there was no audition, thank God. And at the end, I went to dinner. It's a long story I won't even bore you with, but it was a really crazy.
What's the short version?
The short version is I went to dinner over the weekend with the sister of one of my closest friends who lived in New York. And his sister was in town. And he said, you should go out to dinner with her. And so I went out to dinner with a couple other people. Unbeknownst to me, she had just had dinner with Gen Maynard in a bizarre world. And he tells her, he says, we have this new show we're doing, Survivor, and we've just hired the host, Jeff Probst. They hadn't hired me. I didn't know. I'm at home all weekend going, did I get it? Did I get it? We go out to dinner, and she says, I just heard something about you this weekend for, and then she stops, and she goes, I can't even remember now. What was it? What was it? I don't know. So I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. And 3 days later, after I get the job, I call my friend Rich Bogle, and he goes, you're not going to believe it. I knew you had the job on Friday. My sister was at dinner with Gen Maynard, and he told her, not ever thinking she would know you or see you.
How random.
And then I went, oh, that's what she meant when she started to say. So it was a crazy little. But later, when I asked Mark how did it go down? He said, at the end of the meeting, you left, and Moonves turned to me and said, I like both of them. Who do you want? Because whoever you don't pick, I got another show for. And he goes, all right, I'm going to go with Probst. I don't know why, it's just my gut. And later he told me, he said it really came down to your FX live experience and the Sandra Bullock interview, that left turn you thought you made. And then a few weeks later, Phil Kogan gets Amazing Race and begins an Emmy win year after year after year. So, and Tom Bergeron gets Dancing with the Stars. So 3 guys that I really started with, within the course of like a year, all 3 of us had shows on the air 10 years later.
And I guess according to Burnett, since you sent those mock-up headlines, that he did see them.
Yes.
And then he did something similar when he was pitching to CBS.
Which I didn't know until I saw your interview that you did on this same thing, where he talked about he got them from me. And what I didn't know is that when he had pitched the show to CBS, he had pitched a version of Time or Newsweek where it said it's the #1 show. He basically did the same thing. Right. And it's very funny that it came true. Everything that I wrote in those mock-up interviews, which I tried to be as outlandish as possible, came true. Survivor did change the face of television. Survivor did set a summer season viewing record. And in some ways, Survivor knocked Millionaire off the air.
When you came aboard, how far into production were they? Or had they not even started production?
They hadn't started production, but I think I was the last person hired. And I remember that the first thing I got from Mark was, after I got hired, I came in and we were talking and he showed me Eco Challenge. And that was like the next tease, because Eco Challenge was this incredibly beautiful adventure show that he had done for USA Network. And I looked at it and went, I'm in the best hands. I'm in the hands of a filmmaker who has an epic vision for story, and I get to be a part of it. And then he handed me some wardrobe. He goes, here's what CBS wants you to wear. And there were these huge shoots that said CBS, CBS all over it. And I had this vision of jungle and beard and sweat. And so I remember saying, hey, if I need to, what is it, Jeff? What is it? Well, do I have to wear these shirts? I don't care what you wear. What do I care? CBS, we've already got the show. Do what you want. So I dumped those and thought, this is another guy that I'm going to totally get on with because he's a maverick. And we got out there, and I do remember from that season going with no clothes, thinking there must be some clothes in Malaysia, and finding there weren't. And if I look back on that season, I literally am wearing clothes that are 3 times too big. We didn't have a wardrobe person. There's nobody cinching things up. You just put on the shirt, you sweated through it, and you did the show. So there were lots of things about that were so organic and real that are funny now to look back on.
What were your initial responsibilities when you started out on the first season?
Mark was very clear from the beginning that he was hiring a host/producer. And he said, really, one of the reasons that I hired you is I'm going to tell you the story that I want to tell, and then you're going to go out and tell it. And that's what we did. When I first landed in the South China Sea, we went out on a sand spit. It was this little spit of sand in the ocean, and we walked for an hour. And Mark talked. And he said, this is the show. This is the story. And he left, and a chopper flew overhead with a camera on it, and I was mic'd up, and I regurgitated for the upfronts, for the network, in about a 4-minute version of what he just told me. That was my first test. And we got back, and he watched the tape, and he came over and he said, you get it, we're good to go. And so whatever he had told me, he was convinced that I understood what he wanted to do. And to my amazement, to this day, he has never second-guessed a decision I've made on Survivor, which is crazy. We've done 400, I don't know how many episodes we've done. We've been on for 13 years. We're in our 26th season. Never. And I'm sure he sat at tribal councils and went, why are you asking that? Why aren't you asking this? Why'd you piss them off? He never said it. And it's that confidence thing about instilling in a performer that what they're doing is right. And then if you have to guide them off to the side or from the flank, come around the behind and get them. But don't mess with that mojo. And that's what I learned from him is, I'm sure he doubted many things I was doing, but he never told me. And it started on that sand spit when he said, you get it. I don't know if I got it or not, but he convinced me I did.
Well, the very fact, it sounds like you had that autonomy from day one. Did you guys have a discussion about it, or did it just kind of come out organically? I mean, you just saw it happening.
Mark leads by giving you a lot of autonomy, and that's why he has such loyalty. He doesn't tell you how to shoot. He just says, here's what I want it to feel like. I want to be in the jungle. I don't care if there's foreground. I don't care if it's a little fuzzy. I don't care if it's raining. I want to feel it. And if she's crying, stay with her the whole time and just let her cry and hang in there. And, we have guys out on our crew. This is a very common story. They'll be in the river shooting an interview for an hour. Because when we take a survivor out and interview them, we get the whole story for that day. It can go on for an hour. They'll have leeches crawling up and into orifices in their body. They don't stop. And then instead of complaining, they get out and they have another cameraman film them while they're removing it. And it becomes a badge of honor, which is, I'm a reality shooter on Survivor. I was in that leech-filled river for an hour. I got 3. Look at this one got me here. This one got me here. And the third one you can't see, but I got it out. It was that's Burnett. And I remember the very first time he addressed the troops. We only had 80 people on our first crew. We now have 300 plus. Everybody hauled gear season 1. Many times you'd carry tripods back, then you'd go get some more. If you're walking to a challenge, there was no boat to take you. You walked through the jungle for 45 minutes or longer You'd be drenched in sweat. Craig Pelagian was the other EP. We'd all three walk together and we'd just talk. Mark would say, okay, so when the survivors arrive, this is what you're going to say. Say something about, it's been really hard. It has to be hard. Because remind them, Jeff, they have no creature comforts. Remind them they're totally isolated. That would be your story. And then you'd get there and you'd just go. And every so often, the first season, Mark would run up and he'd go, remember, no creature comforts, no phones, no family, nothing. Okay, you've got it. You just do it. And then, and in your head, your short-term memory's holding these 40 thoughts that Mark's just told you, all of which are important. Because in the story, it is epic. It can't just be one layer. It has to have many, many layers. There's a devilish component to Survivor. There's a heroic. There's a goat. There's a vulnerability. There's a trust. There's a game. And there's shelter. And rain's coming. How are you going to make fire? You want all those elements always playing for the audience. So I don't think, in retrospect, you could do it any other way other than to trust that person you put in front of the camera to tell the story. You certainly couldn't hold a cue card up.
Was Burnett there primarily for the first season, or does he continue to have an on-set presence, or how has that evolved over these years?
Mark was on set every day for the first 8 seasons.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, through our first All-Star until The Apprentice hit. And then his attention went more to The Apprentice, still very involved in Survivor. But he told us from the beginning, he said, I won't be here. We're going to build this show together, and then you guys are going to run it. And it was a carrot that he dangled and dropped, which was, if you're good and you stay with me and you're good to me, I'll be good to you. And he promotes everybody. I mean, he's promoted me all the way to a show-running executive producer. I mean, and all the guys before me are running shows all over the place. He's really good that way. And he teaches, what I love about Burnett is even though people will say he's held a deal with in business, he can be a devil, he can be a bastard, he'll do this. That's business. I don't know him from that way. I know him creatively. Creatively, there's been nobody I've worked for that I've enjoyed working with more and who's taught me more. Because creatively, he gets it. He ain't no accident. This isn't like he fell into some format that he found and bought it and it worked. He took Survivor from a little show that was shot in the daytime to a nighttime event where we have it down to red light and blue light. Fire is red in life, and when you get voted out, you go into blue light. You may not see it at home. It's lit blue. There's a coldness. You're done. You're dead. Back to the red. Game continues. Head back to camp. He really got that. And another thing that we decided early on together was let's have our own vernacular. Let's don't say players or contestants, even though now we kind of do. It was castaways. We called them survivors. We called them tribes, not teams. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of people in the beginning who were like, lingo's kind of corny. Yeah, it is when you first hear it. But our feeling was, let's tell a story to the audience that feels as though we've been telling it for years. You're just late. We've been out here forever. These are tribes, and they are survivors. And this is a shipwreck. Yes, it's a conceit. It's all contrived. But, in the spirit of the show, it's really real when you're a player out there.
Well, obviously Burnett has many strengths. Any weaknesses come to mind in terms of, how the show's produced?
Burnett's only weakness that I see is his ideas can be corny. And that's what comes with having big, grandiose ideas. Is sometimes, this is just obviously my opinion, sometimes you go too far. And he did a show called Pirate Master that when I heard it and saw it, it lined up with exactly what I thought it would be. For me, too corny. People on a ship talking like pirates. Yeah. What if it had been incredible? Then we would all went, he's a genius again. When you first hear The Apprentice, you think, I don't know, vying for a job to work for Donald Trump, honestly, sounds kind of boring. And then I was in the Amazon when he showed me episode 1, and I'm sitting in the Amazon, in the river with Burnett going, it's incredible. It's incredible. You knew it was going to be a hit. So it's hard to criticize a guy who's in the Hall of Fame I mean, who's going to be above Burnett in the Reality Hall of Fame? Nobody. Nobody.
You spoke about your role evolving to the point of being a showrunner and an executive producer. As that journey went for you, now that Burnett's really not on set on a daily basis, who do you answer to? Are you the kind of the decision maker there and just maybe check in with him? How does
It
that
depends the level of decision.
Okay.
Yeah. So for the most day-to-day stuff, I can make the decisions. If they're creative, I'm making them.
Okay.
And we have other executive producers, and we have producers. We have an amazing team. So, and we all kind of know the lingo. So we'll meet and we'll throw out an idea, and usually it's a consensus. We'll all go, that's the way to go. But if there's ever not a consensus, part of being a leader is you have to say, I know this may frustrate you, I know it may disappoint you, or you may think it's the wrong idea, but we're going with C. That's what we're doing. If it's a major problem or a major unexpected thing, then you call Burnett. But those are really few and far between. I mean, we know how to handle evacuations. We know what happens to our structure. The way Survivor's built, we have a certain amount of people to get us through a certain amount of episodes. So if we lose somebody due to an evacuation, you have to make a decision creatively. If it's in Act 1, we don't have enough material to let that be the end of the show. That means we're going to have a tribal council, and that means we're going to lose a second person, and that changes our numbers. So now we have to figure out creatively, how do we still get our 13 episode, 14 episode, how do we get our final 3, whatever that problem we're going to have is. But those things we know how to do. We've done them so many times. And the other problems you have with a crew of 300 in a foreign country are you have problems outside of the show. You have people living in a foreign country for months. They get into trouble. Things happen. You have personnel issues you have to deal with. That's when the job gets hairier, and I think that's when you really have to work together to figure out how do we protect some of our crew who might be in trouble in a foreign country, because it's going to happen.
How soon into the production of season 1 did you realize you were working on something that was special?
I knew Survivor was special 20 minutes in when I saw the first piece of tape, and it was Richard Hatch sitting in a tree, and there was this woman, Sue Hawk, and she was a truck driver from, I think, Milwaukee. And Richard has taken the power position, and he's already got his shirt off, and he's saying, I just think we should talk about this. I just think, and everybody's scurrying around underneath him, and they're gathering sticks, because we've just said there was a storm coming, and there was, and you guys better get started on a shelter. And Richard's up there going, I just think we need to talk and figure out a way to communicate. And finally, Sue Hawk walks by and says, Richard, where I'm from, we work while we talk. And that, now this was 13 years ago, that was the moment you realized this collision of a group of Americans from all different walks of life is going to work. She just said, where I'm from, this is how we do it. Now, you and I have to figure out how to get along and build this damn shelter, and then one of us is going to vote the other out. And whoever does will probably end up winning, but that's the game. I got to cut your throat before you cut mine, but I need you right now, so let's don't cut each other's, okay? Ha, fooled you. You know, that's the game. And I never thought it would be, I didn't ever anticipate it would be popular. That never went through my head. Now, as a television person, I would go, oh, I hope it's popular. I just couldn't believe I was on a show that was so cool, that was truly a human sociological experiment, a social experiment, where you're really watching human behavior, true human behavior. We're going to throw you into extreme crisis. What are you going to do? All that stuff you talked about back when we were casting, out the window. You're hungry as hell, and this guy is bugging you, and you're a homophobe, and he's gay, and you're black, and you don't like white guys, and you're old, and she's young, and you're all together in this tiny little shelter, literally rats crawling over you that later you don't know you're going to cook and eat. You're so hungry. It would be good today if it came on. And the only thing I believe that'll take Survivor off the air is numbers, the budget. At a certain point, to do the show the way Mark wants to do it with the epic nature will cost more than we can make. And that's probably when it'll go off the air. But if you were willing to play it down and make it smaller and buy an island somewhere in Panama and call it Survivor Island and do the same challenges every year and not have all the expenses of travel, this show will work for a long time. is it's endlessly fascinating to watch how we behave in certain situations. And you never get the same game ever because you never have the same dynamics.
And different cast members too.
Different cast members. Even if you took the same 16 people from season 1 and played again, the day you had finished, you'd get a different game. Because I'm a different person now. Tomorrow I'll be yet a different person.
Right. What effect did 9/11 have on Survivor? What season was it, and was it in production? And what was the effect of that?
And when 9/11 hit, we were scouting Jordan, the Middle East. And that pretty much shut that down. And that was the biggest impact, was we realized that from a show point of view, we won't be able to produce this show in a lot of countries now because the world's going to change. And then from a human point of view, we had this show called Survivor. And now we're literally talking about real survivors, people who've survived the worst thing that's ever happened. So there was a huge amount of sensitivity to us wondering, should we be on the air this season? How do we handle this? We don't want to be come across as anything that's disrespectful just due to our name. And how do you make a bunch of hoopla about a TV show at that point? So I think it was hard for everybody. And then there was a point, and I don't remember when it was, but there was a point where I felt the audience start to tell me when I would meet people on the street, we're glad the show's on. Probably like when Friends is on, it's comforting.
Yeah.
I can just watch this and not worry about what's happened to our country.
Are you involved in casting?
Yes.
To what degree?
Pretty involved. The way casting works is it's been the same system. Lynn Spillman is our casting director. She spends all year scouting for people. She'll go anywhere. She'll fly to anywhere if she thinks she might meet somebody. She'll go to clubs, bars, supermarkets, swimming pools, the beach, anywhere. And she has a whole team. And they just fan out across America. And we get lots of people sending in tapes, but we also go looking for people. And she brings 75 people maybe to LA, and then we just sit in a room, and it's usually Mark and me, the CBS exec, who's now Jen Bresnan, and a couple other people from CBS and our producers. And it's a room that years ago was a very tough room. It's gotten easier on people. Mark used to be pretty vicious, and in a good-spirited way. He was trying to find out what pushes your buttons. And we used to do the silliest games. Like I would hold up a piece of paper in the middle of it's one person sitting there, and they desperately want to be on the show. So all the cards are in our favor. We don't have anything at stake. So you're going to tell us more than you should about your life, and you're going to reveal more than you know because you're desperate. That's usually what happens. And we have a piece of paper, and on it will be all of their vitals, meaning how much money do they have in the bank as of today? What cars do they own? What's the value? What's their education? Have they had plastic surgery? Have they had any sexually transmitted diseases? Have they been arrested for anything? Everything is on this. So you're looking and you feel a little invasive because you're saying, right now, know your net worth. I know that your breasts aren't real, nor is your nose. You had a DUI 2 years ago. Then you had a assault for yelling at your boyfriend, and you were a cheerleader, and you've dated 4 famous football players. Okay, I know way more about you than you know about me. But we would take things like a piece of paper and we would hold it up and I'd say, did you see this? Mark would, and there's nothing on it.
Right.
It'd be our lunch menu. And Mark would go, yeah. And then the guy would go, what? And I go, no, it's nothing, man. It's a tendency. It doesn't mean anything. Tendency what? The psych report says you have gay tendencies. It doesn't mean anything. You're probably straight. I'm totally straight. Okay. It says you answered some questions that say you might be aroused by men genitalia, and that's all we're talking about. And then you watch how they react. And it was amazing, the little silly games that Mark would play with people in there. Now it's a much easier room. But the casting process is designed to do one thing, that is find out your truth. And if we can find out your truth, then we know how you'll react. It's not that you're great or you're a good person or a bad person. It's you're going to react this way. So if we put you with that woman and you guys with that guy and that guy with that guy, we have some combustible stuff. And we also have some interesting pairings. And we might have an unlikely an alliance. Like in season 1, we had a 72-year-old Navy SEAL who was a homophobe, who ended up becoming friends with Richard Hatch, who was gay. And he said, I can't believe I'm washing the back of this gay guy. If my Navy friends could see me now, my SEAL buddies, they would laugh. That was part of the appeal of the show, was what would you do in dire circumstances?
In building the cast, is it more about, like you were talking about, focusing on the potential interactions with the cast members, as opposed to casting types, like I want a cheerleader, I want somebody that's gay,
we don't cast types like we need a cheerleader. We cast types in terms of archetypes. Mm-hmm. Who's going to be the mentor? Who's going to be the father figure? Who's going to be the mother figure? Who's the young hero? Who's the villain? Who's the wolf in sheep's clothing? Yeah. All of those types we cast. And we do look, and sometimes we have 3 great moms. And we just say, look, we're going with somebody else, but we'd like to use you next season. Or believe it or not, it'll be a year and a half from now. And we did that with somebody that's on the show, that was on the show, Dawn, a woman who came in and she wanted it so bad, she hung in there for 2 years and continued to change her body. She got more fit. She became a different type of mom. She adopted more kids. You know, her whole thing changed, but she was still there. So the casting process is vital to the show because it is your show. We have a format which is locked. We have twists which are variable. We have the execution, which is pretty damn consistent. The one thing that you have to hinge everything on are the people that you put out there. And if you pick the wrong people, it doesn't matter where we are and the water's beautiful. It doesn't matter how fun the challenges are. If you pick the right people, it also doesn't matter if you don't have water or your challenges kind of suck. You still have the right people. You still have interesting conversation.
What happens if you pick somebody, and it's probably happened, where you find they start to try to create a character rather than just be themselves? Does that sometimes, is that good sometimes, or do you want them?
It never lasts.
Okay.
We try to break that in the room. We interview them enough that usually you can realize, dude, you're putting on. I'll tell you why. Because I asked you this question and you said that. So this is all just a facade. So why don't you leave the room? Why don't you come back? There's no harm, no foul. But come back and just be who you are. You're this close to being on the show. Be who you are. You're trying to be a bad guy and you're not. You're a nice guy. But what happens if they try it on the show is it works for the first 8-10 hours. And then start thinking right now, even you, think about when's the last time you went 10 hours without food? 20 hours, 2 days. By 3 days, you can't fake it. No one's faked it. Yeah. You just can't. Your body is just out of its mind with, I'm hungry, I've heard your story 6 times, it's really cold, I don't know how to build a shelter, would somebody please make me a fire, I want to cry. You know, it's how fast it goes. And you see it every time. You see the guys day 1, what's up, Jeff? Loving on the show, dude. And day 3, they're broken. And sometimes they're super fit guys, they're just broken. And then they start looking for reasons why. I'm muscular, man. I need more calories, and she's little. And now we got a show. Now you're already complaining and blaming and pointing fingers.
When contestants are eliminated, where do they go? Do they come home, or are they like in a holding area until they have to come back to be part of a jury for tribal councils?
Yeah.
I mean, where do they kind of exist?
It's a 2-phase process. There's non-jury and jury. So the first 7, 8, 9 people, depending on how many are on the show, will be non-jury. They're not going to make the jury. We won't see them again. So we take them to a place we call Ponderosa, and it's just another sort of holding area. It'll be another island if we're on islands, or it might be a little house that we put people in, and they all live together, and they can eat and, you know, play video games or read their book or go swimming. They're just hostages, really. They would love to go home. But because we don't want people to know the outcome, we want everyone to come home at once. Part of the contract is you have to stay the 39 days. We'll occupy you, but you have to stay. So once we have the entire non-jury group, we send them on some sort of a adventure. So they might go fishing or scuba diving or whatever, but we'll send them on a trek for the last 15 days of the game. And most people have an amazing time because it's a fully paid for adventure with guides that are part of our team that'll take them and take care of them. Then the second half comes in, and those people are going to be in the jury, so they stay in the same place. But at every tribal, they come back and they listen in at the tribal council.
So how in the world do you keep the results secret in the world of TMZ and Twitter and Facebook? How do you pull that off?
Yeah, it's a good question. The only leaks come from the survivors. Our crew doesn't leak it. And nobody knows on our crew. When we shoot the final tribal council, we tape over all the monitors so nobody in the control room can really see what's happening. It's a pretty private experience. Even though we're still voting, we still have tons of cameras rolling. We leave them unmanned, and then we take the votes and we do check them. We didn't used to check them. We used to just put them in a box. And then there was a season where we realized that is crazy. So now we check them, and we have somebody check the tape to make sure we have an image, and we check the audio to make sure we have audio. And then, so there's 3 or 4 people that know, and we just don't talk about it. And there are always fan sites that'll have spoiler lists, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. And it's the fact that they're sometimes wrong that negates the right.
So you don't really know.
You don't know.
But some contestants have leaked.
Yes.
Some information.
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
Contestants leak all the time, and I try to give them a big speech at the end of the show. And after our final tribal council, I say the same thing. I say, look, it's your show. It's in your hands. We've invested a lot, millions and millions of dollars in this season of Survivor. All these people here and all the people you've seen all year, this is how we make our living. But it's your show. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go home and tell somebody, because when you have the information that somebody else doesn't have, you have power.
Right.
And that's the beauty. But here's the thing. You lose your power the second you tell them. They have the power, and now they tell the neighbor, and the neighbor tells the beauty salon, and she tells the mailman. It's your show. The longer you keep it in, the more powerful it will be when it comes out, the better for you. So if you can resist that early temptation to be in charge and gossip, you'll be better off. And just hold it from your family. Let them wonder every week, are you being voted out or not? And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. The longer you're in the game, the more invested you are in keeping the secret. If you're the second one out and you got a bone to pick with Survivor because now you feel like, I wasted 39 days on this damn thing, then you're more likely to try and spread information.
Where do you and the crew stay during production? Is it the tent experience or the Four Seasons or somewhere in between?
Our locations vary depending on where we are. We have stayed in tents. In the beginning, we stayed in tents all the time. We were in tents in Kenya, in Africa, literally in the middle of all this wildlife. And you'd unzip your tent in the morning, one click at a time, because you wanted to not scare off the zebra that were waiting outside you'd literally go, and you'd open up and there'd be a herd of zebra. It was incredible. Same as in Australia, in the outback. Kangaroo sitting right out there. I mean, it was crazy. And then you'd get out and you'd go pick camera gear up and go shoot a TV show. It was nuts. And then we've had times in Panama where we had sort of a rundown resort. There's never anything like the Four Seasons. That doesn't exist because we shoot in a remote place. The Four Seasons would never build where we shoot. When we just shot in the Philippines, the crew were in these little sort of, they were like huts, single person type of thing with a shower and an air conditioning unit and some sense of privacy, but it really does vary.
Is shooting 24/7 or sometimes 24/7 in terms of
always 24/7
the life part of the living part of the survivors? When you're not doing like the challenges or the tribal council, are you nearby sometimes during this shooting, or are you usually somewhere else during?
Geography wise, if you imagine, we need several islands. We need a big one for us, which our massive crew, all of our accommodations, all of our offices, because we have payroll, we have pyro, we have marine.
That travels with the production?
It's part of our production,
okay.
yeah. So we own like 20-something boats now. Mark does. The production owns mini boats. We might own some trucks. We own some gear. So you have this circus that's traveling, and you're shipping it through the water, usually housing it in Malaysia or somewhere like that can get to other places. And then these big containers come in, and they got all your stuff on them. And so you have to have a big area for all your departments. We have 20 departments that are big departments. Then you need a little island for one group of survivors, another island for another group, and if you're doing a different scenario or a third tribe, you need another island for the third tribe. That's kind of the big picture of what you need. So they're on an island, and we have a couple of crews out there, one producer, producer with them. It's very small on the island. Even though we have 350 people, on the island, there's 3. You know, I mean, there's nobody. And they're managing these stories. And same on the other island. What we're doing back home is we're either rehearsing a challenge, which we have a very elaborate, detailed process we go through, or we're working on what the next twist is and we're going to how to execute it, or we're working on any other part of the show that's going on, which is all of those departments we just talked about being the infrastructure for the thing we end up putting out on the air.
Do you use local crews or mostly bring them in from the States?
Well, we have the same crew for the most part. I'd say 70% of our crew is still the same group of men and women we've had going back to Australia, which is when we increased from 80 to 300. We have guys that have been on the show for, 8, 9 years, a long time. And then we always hire 50 or 100 locals. We bring a lot of money into the economy. That's one of the reasons that people want us to come shoot in their community, because we bring in millions just in the business we're going to do and all the local labor. And so for the most part, we have really great relationships. In the Philippines, for instance, the best local labor we've ever had. They loved having us there. And there's a community that forms. And halfway through, you have an event, like we had a big basketball game last year. And it was Survivor, it was the Philippines versus the world. And it took place, and it was a monumental event in this community. Everybody came to this basketball court. And Survivor formed a team, and then the Philippines formed a team, and we had announcers, and we had cheerleaders, and you really bond, and then you leave.
Aside from your direct interactions with the survivors, both in the challenges and the tribal, the councils, are you briefed on a day-to-day basis of what's going on in the camps? Are you kind of pretty close to the story?
Yeah, it's odd because we have daily downloads every night. The producers come back from the beach, and all the producers gather in a room, and they crack a beer, and they decompress, and they tell you what happened. And theoretically, I'm supposed to go to those meetings. Mark probably thinks I still go to those meetings. But I don't go to them because I don't really need to know, and I don't want to know. I pride myself on the fact that while I do know some stuff going into tribal, I don't know enough that it prohibits me from asking the questions that the audience will want asked. Okay. So I've learned over the years that I really ask the same questions. I just put different words. It's always, who's the hero, who's the GOAT, who's pulling their weight, who's not, who do you like, who's driving you nuts, how much does it suck to lose, what's great about winning. Really, they're just the same big basic topic starters. And what you're looking for is the detail in their answer that leads you to the next question. They give you the direction to go by what they say. And somebody always says something, because when there's only one person, it's easy to lie to me. But when there's 2 or 3 or 4 or 8, it's pretty tough to say something that's going to satisfy me. Because if I'm not satisfied, I will come back harder. And I do use psychological warfare early on by saying, here's how tribal works. I'm going to ask you a question. If you say, I don't know or I'm not sure, I'm going to ask you a tougher question. And I'm pretty sure I'm better at this than you are because I've been doing it longer and I don't have $1 million on the line. So the easiest way to keep me off your back is give me something. And if that means pushing me onto him, all the better. So I try to get in their heads early on that this will be tough if you try to get around it. And usually it complements their need to get it on someone else in order to move further in the game. So I just use what's there. That way I don't have to worry when I go home and go to bed that I outed something. If I see you at challenges making goo-goo eyes at the young girl, I'm going to ask you. No one had to tell me you have the hots for her. I'm a guy, I'm watching. And the question is, why on earth would you make eyes to somebody in a game that is about getting rid of people? You now just make me think you're together. That's 2 votes. Now you got a target on your back. Jeff, I'm not saying anything that the audience isn't thinking. If you're dumb enough to do it while our cameras are rolling, you got it coming. And if you're really good, you'll now play this off of her and put it on her. And Richard Hatch was really good about taking a question and turning it into a beautiful opportunity, like a politician, to bury somebody. And I just ask the question, and it's what you do with it.
With the intensity of the shooting situation, Is it a problem with, are there some real strict rules about the interaction between crew members
Yes.
and survivors?
Yeah.
And how has that worked?
Well, we've lessened it in some ways over the years in terms of this. In the beginning, everybody's watch was covered in tape. There was no talking whatsoever from the crew. It really was like this. And the guy could be on fire and you'd just be watching your camera. Over the years, we've realized that there was a certain amount of isolation that maybe worked against us because they might have felt a little disconnect. So now the cameraman can be friendly in terms of good morning, but they don't say, hey, my name's Rob. It's good to meet you, man. I got kids too. I heard you talking about
Right.
you. No, that doesn't happen.
Right.
Because the deprivation is part of the show. They have nowhere to go. They have no one to talk to. They would love for me to visit the island and come talk, not because they want to see me, but because there'd be somebody new to talk to. That's why I don't go on rewards anymore. That's why I don't go to the camp, is that we want to keep that wall there so that when your loved ones do come, you can't stop it. You can't stop the tears because you're the first person I can trust in 30 days. You know, it's all part of the game. It's the same reason we have 3-day cycles for an episode. We don't need 3 days necessarily to get everything in, but it's that second day in the middle of the afternoon when there's no challenge and no tribal and nothing to do that you are so bored that you say something you're going to regret and it starts a fight. Or you decide, you know what, I hate my alliance, I'm going to create a new one. Or you chop your finger off. You know, any of those work.
Speaking of bringing loved ones into the situation, you've brought your family on at least one of these survivor adventures, right?
Yes.
What was the motivation and how did that go?
Well, once I got married and I married into this beautiful family with 2 kids, there was no question they were coming. That was part of it. And I have to say I work with an amazing group of people that not everybody can bring their family. We're pretty tight on how that works because we have so many that if everybody on our crew brought their family, we'd have 1,000 people. And we can't afford it. We can't house them. We don't have the liability for kids. And so it's one of the few areas on Survivor where the hierarchy does come into play. I take advantage and I bring my family. And they're only there for a week, you know, or something. But in terms of a bonding experience, it's crazy.
Have they enjoyed it?
Oh, it's fantastic. If you have kids, coming to a Survivor location is about as cool as it gets, because not only are you typically in the middle of the ocean and we have a dive team. So if you're old enough, like Michael, he learned to dive last year at 8 with a dive master. But we also have this thing called the Survivor Art Department, which is like Disneyland. You want to build a sword? No problem. You want to make something out of Legos? We'll figure it out. You can literally go in and build anything you want. So your imagination goes wild. And it's one of the few areas that I'm frustrated with our show is we haven't figured out how to get crew members to have their families. And Mark's open to it. We just can't figure out how to do it. And it honestly took me a long time before I had anybody visit. And Mark finally said, listen, let me tell you why you can take advantage of this. Because for years, we all had the same tent. When we were in the outback or when we were in Africa, Mark's tent was right next to mine, same size as mine, which was right next to the young PA. And if he farted, I heard it, and so did the PA. There was no hiding anything. And there was a certain point where he said, Jeff, these other people come and go. They take a year off. They come back and do another season. You're here every day, every season. I want you to be here every day, every season. So if bringing out your family helps that, just do it. No one's going to resent it. And I went to all the heads of departments and said, look, how do you guys feel because I don't want to break our thing. I don't want to be the guy now I got my family. And everybody was really cool. Said, dude, I'd do it if I could, so do it. And we've tried to get now, this doesn't sound like it's about TV maybe, but you're running a show for 13 years. How do you keep your crew happy? And that's one of the things we've tried to figure out is how can we make you guys happy when you're in the middle of nowhere? There's not a bar to go to. In the Philippines, there's nothing. It's an island. Nothing. Literally. Yeah. There's not. So We try to do things where if we overlap seasons, for these 10 days, you should bring your family out. We're not shooting. They're on your clock. We're not liable. We do all our legal things, but we can make this sort of an adventure. So we're trying to do that more and more. And we have a very good track record of hiring spouses. We have probably 40 couples on our show.
Wow.
Because we want you to come back. So if that means getting your wife a job, what does she do? Great. Seamstress? All right. We'll figure out, we don't have a seamstress job, but we'll figure something out that involves sewing somehow in the art department.
Wow. Who creates the challenges, and how are they tested?
The challenges are created by a group, but John Kerhofer runs the challenge department, and he's run it from day one. He's been there forever. He's one of the 4 or 5 guys that have been on every season like I have. And we have a very, very specific process. It starts with the pitch. John and his team will work up a bunch of challenges, and then they'll send them out. And then we look at them, and Mark looks at them, and Jen looks at them at CBS. And we'll make our notes. And we're pretty good at all of us sort of saying, now, if we do this, is that going to play? How are we going to cut this? How long is it going to be? Is it going to be exciting? We kind of go through all those things. And for the most part, John knows what he's doing so well that 80% of them, you're going, that's awesome. Then we get out on location and we do a test block, which is a rough build. It's not finished, no cameras. It's me, Kerhofer, and a couple of dream teamers. And we just look at it with our director, Dave Dryden. And we just go, okay, so there's a thing there. And then they run through and it's like ropes and knots. And then when they get there, they have to, and you kind of walk through it a little bit. And then you do a full rehearsal with the dream team. And the dream team, their job is to run the challenge and to look for ways to break it and look for ways to cheat and look for problems that we're not anticipating. And we modify it at each step along the way. We keep changing it. And if we find a cheat, we decide fix it or we decide leave it. If we think it's a tiny little cheat that somebody might find, then we leave it. And we hope that one of them goes, oh my God, I figured out a shortcut. If it's a massive problem, we change it. And then we run it for real. So when we run it, we've seen it a couple of times, and we feel very confident it's going to work. We know where all our point of view cameras are, plus all our cameras that are camoed, plus our, it's an orchestra that Dave Dryden does, where if you watch a Survivor Challenge, we are everywhere. And it really is this choreography of the big jib is up here getting a big shot, and that's our establishing shot. And then Dryden will say, handhelds, go. And handhelds will run in, and they'll get some tilt up and pan over and hands on balls and things like that, hands on, whatever, playing pieces. Mm-hmm. And then they jump out and we're back to the big shot. We're back. So and then when you cut it together, it looks like this film that you've shot 20 angles on. It's just really well thought out. And in our whiteboard meeting, Dryden will draw out all the camera positions. So you're focusing on this, your long lens back here, you're here, and you put all the pieces together with our point of view cameras that are shoved in little places and our guys in camo that are sometimes in the middle of a challenge and you don't even see them because they're camoed like they're part of the challenge and they're getting the cross by. All of a sudden, you've got this really amazing challenge that you did once live. That was it.
So to achieve that, to reposition cameras and things like that if it's necessary, do you literally just kind of stop or stop the challenge or pause and then pick it up? Or
no stopping ever.
Okay.
Survivor's ready, go.
Okay.
Then it's a carefully
like
orchestrated.
It's coordinated, okay.
It's just Dryden in a headset to different guys. It literally, if you're watching it, it looks like some sort of rehearsed, but it's not, because he doesn't know what's going to happen. He just knows that generally speaking, at a certain point, there's going to be 3 guys here. You run in, get close-ups of the faces, tilt down to the hands, get the puzzle piece, get out. We're back to the big shot. I'm moving up and down the line, making sure I'm not blocking the camera, which is in the camo on a 20 by, back there getting the tight shot of the eyes, tilting down from as we're building up, and the sweat, and there's no stopping ever.
Because I've seen phenomenal shots where it might be somebody in water and there's like a helicopter shot, and then it cuts to under the water shot, like a diver shot. It's like, how is that pulled off?
The underwater shots get me because I've held those rigs. They're really heavy, and I don't even know how they see through them. But we had some shots just on this last season in the Philippines where they will track a guy as he's jumping off a ledge, hits the water, and then they're under and they're under with him. So they're controlling their breathing enough now that they can sink with him, get down as he's trying to untie the knot, and then tilt up as he swims to the surface where our camera on the water picks him up going, I got it. Right. It's crazy. And they do it like it's not like we have a big party afterwards and go, did you get it? Of course you got it. I got it.
Do the survivors, do they get a more detailed briefing about how a challenge goes beyond what you say on camera? So they really, truly, you want them to understand everything about it?
I give a really quick on camera description of the challenge, just simply because we don't want to waste show time going into the details. And then we walk them through and they can ask questions as much as they want. We always want them to succeed. We want the challenge to work. And then when we get to the individual portion of the game, they can ask me individual private questions like, what if I do this? Is that okay? Can I look at their thing? So it's, even though it appears it's a very loose, we treat it with a lot of integrity because we realize it is $1 million prize and that you guys are really, really playing hard for it.
Let's talk about the tribal council for a couple of minutes. The significance of the torch and the flame being extinguished. How important or how significant has it become in the storytelling of Survivor?
You know, it's funny about the torch because Mark wasn't even 100% sure on the torch in the beginning. I mean, I think he pretty sure he would use it, but he would say, we're probably going to have a torch and we're going to snuff it and put it out. And it's symbolic because fire represents life. Think about it, Jeff. Fire represents life, right? If you don't have fire, you're going to die. That's where all these lines came from that we say. There was no script. We didn't sit down and write it. They just started evolving as the show evolved. And fire represents life was one that he really wanted to hit. It became a part of this thing that I say at every first tribal council now. Fire represents your life. It's corny, but the whole thing is corny. If you look at just what we're saying, it's very corny. 20 Americans have been dropped in a remote island. Okay, not really. They left home, they got a passport, we paid for it. But in the story, that's what's happened. So in the story, the torch is very important. It's symbolic. You're out. When that thing is out, it's done. And I've done enough tribals that I can see in the eyes of people, a lot of people will watch that torch go out. And you wonder what they're thinking because it's over. There's no second chance. And I'm done. I had a shot at $1 million. I'm done. I was totally betrayed by a bunch of goofballs over here that I'd like to scream at, but I'm in shock, so I really don't even know what I want to say. But what Mark was really clear about was red at tribal, fire. And in some of our seasons of fire, especially before HD, some of our seasons, tribal council is hard to see. It's not lit like a game show. It's lit like... because it really was fire. In fact, our first season, it was fire. And then in the second season, we added a couple of little lights to give us a little light on people with a little red gel. But for the most part, that center fire is putting off a lot of source.
Yeah.
And then he was very clear, when they leave, the second they leave tribal council, it's blue. And so that was very important to him. A funny story about the Tribe of Spoken is I had a whiteboard in the creative room, and I'm trying to come up with the equivalent of, is that your final answer? Because millionaire was the rage. And we have a photo of it somewhere. We had 40 different things, and none of them were any good. They were all just variations on, is that your final answer? And I like, we're down to 2 days before we're going to shoot and start the show, and I'm thinking, man, I can't just snuff the torch. I mean, what are you going to say? And I didn't have it. And I'm talking with Mark, and I go, look, I hate to ask you this, but I feel like I need to say something at the end. And he said, yeah. Say, obviously your tribe don't want you around no more. and I'm thinking, oh God, that doesn't work. And I go, I don't know. And he goes, Jeff, what do you want me to say? I mean, it's the way it is. The tribe has spoken. You've got to go. And the only thing I did was grab the Tribe has spoken from Mark. And years later, we were being interviewed, and somebody asked him, where did that come from? And he said, I think you did. I think you came up with it, Jeff. And I had that moment with the devil and the angel. And I went, oh my God, I could take it right here. I said, no, you came up with it.
But you found it at least.
Yeah. I listened.
Yeah, but great impression, by the way. These ongoing impressions of Mark Burnett are very, very good.
He's so fun to impersonate. His best one is, I could be wrong, but I'm usually not.
Do you have a favorite tribal council?
I've had a ton of favorite tribal councils. Tribal has gotten so much better. I think tribal got better when I stopped saying, even though some fans of the show will say I say more now, I think I say less. And it started about, 5 or 6 years ago. I found myself a little, not bored with the show, but at Tribal I thought, I feel like I can sort of do this pretty easily now, and I need to up it. I need to get deeper into this. How do I get deeper? And I had spent the first few years looking for moments, and I was trying to put a button on every moment. So somebody would say something, and I would try to cap it so that I thought we had a moment. And then one season I thought, I wonder if I say much less. Maybe actually I should get more out of the way. And even though I'm still vocal and ask a lot of questions, if you really watch Tribal play out live, which can be an hour long, I will just look at somebody. The oldest interviewing trick in the book. It's amazing. And I remember one woman in particular, I asked her one question. What's it like? I said, what's it like to be the older person? And she's like 35, But on Survivor, you can get away with that, and it's going to get to her. She's going to react. What are you talking about, 35? 35 is not old. And I just kept looking at her. What? Why are you looking at me? And then I thought, God, this is really so much easier this way. And then finally she goes, okay, fine, I'll say it. You think you're all that because you're 20. And I don't really care that you're 20. I'm like, oh man, I just got to get out of the way. And then Tribal started getting even better, where people are always amazed. Why do these people say all this? I have no idea. I just listen. Often I throw one question out, like, who's the biggest bozo right now in the tribe? And sooner or later, someone will roll their eyes, and you say, why are you rolling your eyes? No one wants to say who the bozo is. It's Mary. Mary, you are the bozo. Now Mary's going to retaliate.
But have you found that part of your interview style is sometimes not asking the question?
Yeah. I think sometimes you can let it hang, and sometimes they will incriminate themselves, and all you're really doing is clarifying. So, Jim just said you were the biggest bozo. That can't feel good to be called a bozo. No, because I'm not a bozo. And
But you give them the space to kind of just sometimes put their own foot in their mouth sometimes.
Yeah. I think the other thing is, really, I've been influenced so much by Howard Stern and his fearlessness in asking a question. And on Survivor, how it really helped me was I found the courage to ask the questions that I thought the audience wanted, even if I thought it might be insulting to the person. It's not that I don't have a heart or don't care that you are suffering and I know you're going to cry by the time this tribal's over. I already know, because I can see where your head's at. But my job is to ask the question the audience wants, and the audience is going to say, despite the fact that you're crying, most people are still going to say that you are unlikable. And so, have you always been unlikable? Or is that just being drawn out here? It's hard questions to ask, but they're fearless in the sense that that's the truth. I'm pretty much the audience. I'm just a guy. I show up at the challenges and I show up at Tribal. I don't live with you. I wouldn't want to be with you. I wouldn't invite you over for dinner. And all those people just said they never want to see you again. I'd be crushed if you just start having that conversation. But it took me a little, I think it was the influence really of Stern specifically, who breaks so many molds and barriers and gets criticized so many times, but rarely gets applauded for what he has created, which is, I'm going to do the best interview you've ever had done to you. And now he's so good, people want to please him, and they come in and give him an interview, because that's the invoice. If you want to be on my show, you're going to be here for an hour, and you will talk about everyone you've slept with, and you will talk about the biggest regret, and you will talk about who you don't like. I don't even have to prep you for it. You're going to, because I'm going to ask you.
And with that, we'll change tape.
Okay.